For King.
Thank you. I rise to speak on the motion moved by the member for Florey. I thank the member for her many years of determined advocacy on matters related to women's rights. I also thank our Deputy Premier for sharing her steadfast support for this motion and for our colleagues for their support as well. I support the motion related to considering the significance of the adult suffrage bill and support the points A, B, C, D and E and the move to appoint a committee. I will take a moment to recap on the Adult Suffrage Bill 1894 in case anyone who may read or listen to my words is not aware. A petition with some 11,600 signatures was presented to the Parliament by the then member for North Adelaide, the Honourable George Hawker, in August 1894, requesting that women in the colony be granted the right to vote. The petition can be viewed in Parliament House, Adelaide. The final roll measured 122 metres long. The petition is commonly referred to as the Women's Suffrage Petition. The wording of the petition is as follows. To the Honourable Speaker and members of the House of Assembly of South Australia in Parliament assembled, the petition of the undersigned adults, residents in the province of South Australia, humbly sheeweth that your petitioners, and convinced about the absolute justice of giving women the franchise for both Houses of Parliament on the same terms as it is now or may thereafter be granted to men. This bill gave women the rights previously only granted to men. It was felt that in 1894 that it was ridiculous that in our modern society of free settlers that women did not have the same rights as men. This was a significant moment in South Australia's history. So in 1894, women in South Australia gained the right to vote when men had the right to vote in South Australia since 1856 for the 38 years prior. In 1895, all adult women in South Australia, including Aboriginal women, won the right to vote and sit in Parliament. 54 years later, in 1949, the right to vote in federal elections was extended to Aboriginal people who had served in armed forces and who were enrolled to vote in state elections. South Australian women were the second to gain the vote after New Zealand women, who secured this right in 1893, and momentously, South Australian women were the first in the world to gain the right to stand for election. Previously, South Australia had granted voting rights in local government elections to women property owners in 1861, but it took 8 attempts and another 30 years before the parliamentary franchise was extended to all adult females. After private member bills had failed, the government of Charles Cameron Kingston, who had originally opposed such a measure, adopted the proposals of the Women's Suffrage League. I wholeheartedly support this motion today because, one, I know I stand on the shoulders of the fearless and courageous women who come before me, and two, we recognise here, as Mary Lee said, the strenuous work that Australian women put into the suffrage campaigns, organising meetings, forming societies, writing speeches and delivering them, leading deputations to parliamentarians, securing signatures on petitions and making speeches. I can only imagine how hard it would have been for these men and women to speak up 124 years ago and state a case for women to have the right to vote and to stand for Parliament. It is reported feminists in South Australia in the late 19th century faced an unsympathetic media. They were labelled as the shrieking sisterhood. The men who supported them fared no better. They were called poor, wretched creatures and accused of being illogical and absurd. I have read this was an era, after all, when it was still lawful for a man to beat his wife, so longer as he does not use a stick thicker than his thumb. But these women were not to be stopped. In my maiden speech, I talked about the change we in this 54th Parliament can lead in our South Australian community today, and I was heartened by so many colleagues agreeing that it's time for a safer South Australia. And although today it is no longer lawful for a man to beat his wife 124 years later, we have talked about 1 in 4 children growing up, watching and listening to this happening and this violence in our Australian homes today. Violence is costing our community billions of dollars, and it is still robbing too many people of the chance to live their best life possible. Experiencing violence in childhood, as I can personally attest, can adversely impact your health, your self-belief and your confidence, which of course then impacts your ability to run for such positions in government. The perpetration of men's violence against women is understood to be a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between men and women. 124 years after women have gained the right to vote, we are still discussing that we need more research to understand which aspects of gender inequality have the most impact on violence against women. I have read in 1894, male principals were severely tried by the idea that women should step out of their allotted role as guardians of the home to enter the sphere of male power. Cartoonists worried about who would cook the tea when women entered public office. When I door-knocked in King, many women said to me after I introduced myself, "I will just get my husband." Another woman, a mother in her 30s, said, "I will let my husband know you're here when he gets home from work, as he makes these decisions for us." Thankfully, there were many other couples who also had this discussion together with me. When I door-knocked, I wanted to hear from every person their thoughts on what would improve the quality of life, and I wanted to hear their aspirations for our South Australian community. Men and women, young and old, I wanted to hear from everyone. I did wonder whether the women who were deferring their opinions to their husbands had knowledge of how hard the brave suffragettes had fought for our right to vote and to stand for Parliament. I support this motion because I wish to provide further information to our community and cause more robust discussion about where we have come from, where we are today in terms of equal rights and representation, and what deeds, not words, are needed to progress us towards a time when the gap in female representation, which exists today across all levels of government, is not so substantial. This motion provides opportunity to review, question, highlight and provide education on the current levels of female representation in local, state and federal government, and to explore further the barriers to entry. On December 18, 2019, South Australia will celebrate 125 years since the passage of a bill granting women the right to vote and stand for Parliament. The campaign at that time to gain public support was a collective effort by men and women. I personally have strong support from men and women in the Liberal Party to help me to believe in myself and to campaign to earn the trust of the electorate and to represent them well. As I've shared, Minister David Pisoni prompted me to consider running for Parliament when he asked me the question, "What will you do about making children safer in our community?" I will always thank him for asking this question and for his ongoing counsel. Similarly, I thank the Speaker of the House, I thank the Education Minister, I thank the member for Bragg for their ongoing counsel, and I'm proud to say I feel very supported in this government and in our party to be here today. Men and women both have a depth of life experience to offer unique perspectives, and this is valuable to decision-making and it's valuable to serving the community. I ask all of us here to consider how we make these opportunities to serve more accessible and a reality for all those who wish to serve. I recognise today the important tapestry hanging, as the member for Bragg did, on the government side of this House above us. A woman's place is in the House. It refers to this House, Parliament House. I thank the member for Flory again for raising this important motion, which I support in full. I look forward to the opportunities of lots of robust discussion, lots of input from men and women in the planning and decision stages of our preparation for the 125-year celebrations. I look forward to lots of actions and delivery of change with these colleagues in the House and in the community.
Member for King, I'm sorry, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Hyson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy.